When I was in my early 20s, I made a $10,000 mistake. Don't make the same mistake I did. And just a disclaimer to start this video, this is not financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor. This is solely for educational purposes only so that hopefully you guys don't make the same mistake that I did. So when I was younger, around the end of my time in high school, I was very fortunate to receive a car from my parents. The car had around, I believe, 160,000 kilometers on it, so it had been driven quite a bit, but it was a nice car. And again, I was very fortunate to be in a position where my parents were able to gift this to me. Of course, I had to pay for the insurance, the gas, and everything else, but that is something that is of course not super common. So I was very, very grateful for that. Long story short, eventually it got to a point, especially with the car being, starting to drive at around 160,000 kilometers. The cost for the repairs on the vehicle ended up being more than the actual value of the vehicle itself. So at this point in time, I thought, okay, buying another car makes sense, but buying a car wasn't actually the mistake itself. So around 3.5 years ago, I walked into the dealership thinking, okay, what kind of monthly payment or what kind of, say, for example, bi-weekly payment can I afford? And that's kind of how I approached it when I looked at getting a car. So, I found a car that I really liked, walked into the dealership, we kind of talked about it with the salesperson, and I was like, okay, I think I can afford this bi-weekly payment. And I believe it was around $237 bi-weekly. And I was like, okay, you know what? That's not bad. I can afford that. But that's what the issue was. I looked at it as, yes, I can afford this $237 biweekly payment instead of, can I afford a $35,000 loan? And that's where people mess up. And this is exactly what dealerships want. They don't want to ask, what total price are you comfortable with? They actually ask, what monthly payments are you looking for? And that's the issue. And then they stretch the time period of the loan out so that those monthly payments are nicer. So that's why you see a lot of these loans be like, say, for example, 7 years, because the longer you stretch out the loan, the lower your payments are, but you're just paying so much interest on these loans. So, like I said, it's been around 3.5 years or so since I bought this car or I financed this car. And since that time, I've made around $20,000 in payments on the car. And after this time, I realized I actually own about a few $1,000s in value of the actual car. After making all those payments, like I said, over $20,000 in payments on the car, the value of the car right now, I only own a couple $1,000s of it. And so I looked at it, I said, on the other side, if I had just invested that money, the money that I'm making, in payments, into a fund making an average of 10%, I would have over $25,000 in additional funds right now. And that's why it's so important when buying a car to, of course, first, if you can buy it outright, do that if possible. Most of us probably won't be able to do that because, it's quite expensive. But if you can do that, that's obviously the best option. Again, depending on your financial situation and things like that, it differs for everyone. But if it's possible for you and it's affordable for you, buying it outright is usually going to be better because you don't have to pay that interest. Now, if you were like me in that situation and you absolutely can't, and you need a vehicle, because I needed a vehicle to get to and from work, and yes, I did have one, but again, the repairs were way more than the actual value of the car itself, then it's important to ensure that you can afford it, ensure that it's reliable, and also ensure that the interest percentage is fair. Now, the interest that I was paying on my loan was about 9%, I believe it was. And, in the grand scheme of things, honestly, that's a lot better than what a lot of people sign up for. I've heard horror stories of people who sign up for percentage rates that are like double that, because they can get the payment so low. They want to get this super nice car, because they look at it and again, they say, oh, I can afford these, like monthly payments, these biweekly payments. And that is just not the way to look at it. And the issue with most car loans is that you put yourself in negative equity. Now, for those of you that aren't really familiar with negative equity, a good way to put it is, say, for example, the value of my car right now, if I were to go sell it, if I got a really good deal, I'd probably get around $25,000 on the car. But the actual value of the total loan itself was somewhere around, and I would have to look at the specific numbers, but around like $33,000 or so. So that being said, if the loan was worth $33,000, I signed up for that loan, and the car's value was only $25,000, that means I'm in negative equity because I owe more than the car is actually worth. So if I were to go sell the car, I would still owe money on top of whatever I sold the car for. So I think the biggest lesson is to never shop based on the payment. Again, whether monthly, biweekly, weekly, whatever it is, never look at it like that when you're going to buy a car. You should shop based on the total cost of the vehicle. And that also includes any fees, any taxes, anything like that. Make sure you fully understand that when going in. And a lot of people will just go and say, oh, I want this car. I don't care the details. I'll pay it off in this amount of time. And sure, maybe you'll feel that way in the moment, but you'll get, it's not even halfway through the total like lifetime of my loan. And you'll look back on it and be like, wow, I really wish I didn't do that. Or I at least, had switched around some of the terms, found a better loan, etc. And I get it. I guess I would consider myself a car guy. I'd love to have a BMW or an Audi, but it's important to be smart and also practice delayed gratification as well, right? You don't need to be driving, a super nice German vehicle when you're 19 or when you're 20, right? People do that because they want other people to be impressed with, the car they're driving, or also, like I said, if you're a car guy, you're interested in it. But it's important to not necessarily ruin yourself financially, but put yourself at a disadvantage because, you jump into it before you can actually afford it. And also, I mentioned delayed gratification in the most humble way possible. If I wanted right now, I could sell my car, decide to go get a Porsche, but, I'd rather build my wealth than, drop it into a depreciating asset right now. And I think that's super important, especially when you're, in your younger years. I'm in my, I guess, mid to late 20s now. Time has flown by. But, even at this point in time, yes, it's important, now and again to, obviously experience nice things, buy nice things for yourself, but it's also important that you're investing into your future and you're making smart decisions that you will thank yourself for later. So, looking back, there are a couple options of what I could have done instead. So, first off, is I could have kept the old car longer because it, of course, had no payments. Like I said, I was paying more money in fixing the car than the actual value of the car itself or what I would have gotten if I sold the car. But in reality, making these payments every single month on this car is probably, and I can say almost certainly, more expensive than the cost to repair the car. So while yes, like I said, paying the money to fix the car was more than the car was worth, paying the money to fix the car was probably less than buying a new car. So that leads into my second option as well, which is just buying a cheaper used vehicle. While I did avoid, like I talked about, buying a luxury vehicle, I still could have bought a cheaper vehicle that was still reliable and, have saved money doing that. And then lastly, what I actually ended up doing was moving my loan to a lower interest rate sooner. So, like I mentioned, my loan was 9%. And again, that's not crazy, crazy bad in the grand scheme of things, but yes, it is still bad. And I was able to get it moved to a significantly lower percentage. So that way, at least I know my investments are likely making more than the interest on the loan is making, and also increasing my payments so I can pay it off sooner. Now, I'm not sharing this story with you guys because I'm perfect with money. I'm sharing it because I wasn't. And if I can save one person from making the same mistake that I did, then the $10,000 lesson wasn't completely wasted. So hopefully if you guys made it to the end of the video, you learned something from this, and hopefully you can avoid making the same mistake that I did. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments section down below and I'll be happy to answer them. But that's all for today's video, guys. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.